This is episode 82. And today we're talking about the cannabis industry and how it's an incredible industry that's growing. And how I want individuals that are watching this video to understand about the benefits of this rising cannabis economy. And I'm going to talk about the different legal strategies and the business strategies that individuals need to know to get involved and stay compliant with the law, because this is a growing industry. And I want individuals to be mindful of it and be able to participate. What's up, guys? Thank you for tuning in. Today we're talking about the cannabis industry. If you look at the numbers of the cannabis industry, the numbers are saying, what are the numbers saying? Numbers are saying that by 2024, cannabis is expected to be over $100 billion industry. It's pretty impressive, because the idea is that this was illegal. It's still illegal from a federal level, but it's increasingly becoming legal. We just saw, if you've been watching the news lately, you saw New York just legalize legalized cannabis. So we're going to talk all about that. But this video is kind of in two parts. The first part, we're going to talk about the legal history of cannabis, because that's very important. We need to understand how this became so demonized, how it became illegal, and how so many people got put into prison because of this stuff. And then we're going to talk about the business opportunity from it, the business aspect of it, how you can take advantage of this new industry that is here before our very own eyes. I really want people to be involved in this, and because it's been prevented from people from participating in so many people got locked up because of this. So I want to talk about different paths and opportunities for individuals in it. So let's first talk about the legal history, because we have to understand how we got to where we are today. We have to understand that fully, because cannabis was legal at one point, but then it slowly started becoming illegal, and the penalties started getting harsher and harsher. So we need to really understand that. We need to be able to understand, how did we get here today? So we're going to talk about that. The first thing is the Marijuana Act of 1937. So we're going back to 1937, and how it initially allowed police officers to arrest people who were like companies that were selling marijuana, or individuals that were using marijuana. They were getting arrested because they were failing to pay a marijuana tax. So it started out with 1937 as a tax. Then 1952, another law. They started giving out mandatory sentences for marijuana crimes. They increased the punishment of marijuana. Then 1970, this is important, with the Controlled Substance Act, it made marijuana a Schedule I drug. This is very important to understand. This is where it really started, right here. Marijuana became the level. They treated marijuana the same. They consider marijuana the same legally as heroin, LSD, ecstasy. Marijuana became the equivalent of those drugs. Like these, because most people say these are hard drugs. These are drugs that require some type of manufacturing involved in it. Cannabis, in essence, is just a plant that grows. So that when it really started. And then we have 1986 Anti-Drug Abuse Act. This was started with President Ronald Reagan. So he's starting to get up a whole lot now. And President Reagan started the mandatory sentences, and also the 3 strikes policy. We started hearing about people having 3 strikes and pretty much been in jail for decades if they messed up 3 times. This is where it started happening. And then you also took it a step further with George Bush, the oldest George Bush, the President George Bush, the oldest. He did the war on drugs, and we understand that it's still, in essence, is a war on drugs, that is a drug that exists to this day. And that's when it really started. The penalties and the severity of individuals using cannabis started to increase, and with that, it started doing long prison sentences. And with that, it started doing long prison sentences for just possessing it. Simple possession. These are non-violent crimes. You're getting long prison sentences. And you saw with President Trump, he did a criminal justice reform to individuals that were in jail for many of these are non-violent crimes. Like these aren't violent crimes, And with the prison reform, people are starting to leave prison because of that. That was signed by Donald Trump. And you're just starting to see how it's just like throughout the decades, it was purposely made illegal. And I'm not here to make a judgment on it, but when the effects of it, you have to ask about what are the effects, because there's a famous economist. He talks about how there are no solutions. There's only trade-off. Which trade-off are you willing to be okay with? And this trade-off, the war on drugs. I'm not saying there was no merit to that, but when it came to the cannabis plant, something that just grows naturally, you have to begin to ask, was it ever a good thing to make cannabis illegal? because you start seeing the propaganda. If you ever seen the famous movie Reefer Madness, it's a famous movie where it's talking about just how like, it's a movie put out where they're talking about just how like, it was very famous, talking about how kids who are smoking cannabis in high school, how they're gonna be committing all these violent crimes, how they're gonna be, how it's a gateway drug to all these big other things. That was propaganda. You know, these is real things that were done to demonize the plant, and now it's being made legal. Now it's being made legal. You know, so we have to talk about that. Was it ever a good thing? Was it ever a right law? We have to talk about that. So from a philosophical standpoint, like, was it ever a just law? These are some of the questions that Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement had to ask, you know, because the individual would say, Martin Luther King, I understand what you're saying, but I'm not racist. This is what the law said. The law said you can't come into my restaurant. The law said you can't come to this school. I'm not racist. So Martin Luther King, to the standpoint, from a philosophical standpoint, it says that this is an unjust law. And if it's an unjust law, then it's no law at all. And he was basing this off of St. Thomas Aquinas, a theologian, a famous biblical scholar. St. Thomas Aquinas, he said the idea is that unjust laws are no laws at all. So if it's an unjust law, it's no law at all. So therefore we have a right to not follow this law. So these are some of the things they did. They weren't just marching and just saying things I'll just willy-nilly. They had sound philosophical and religious beliefs they had in these things. They were doing these things. And the idea is you have to ask that just because it's a law doesn't necessarily mean it's a right law. Like, when do we ever have true knowledge? When do we ever have the rightness? When do we ever have? Because the idea is that laws are supposed to be based on morality. They're supposed to be based on what they call like universal law, maybe God laws, or however you want to call it. And if it's not based on that, then it should not be a law at all. And we saw that no matter how severe you made the crime for cannabis, people are still going to use the cannabis plant. So should we have ever, the question we have to ask is, should it have ever been illegal in the first place? And I think a big part of individuals who are in the cannabis industry, they have to have a dual role. They have to be businessmen and also have to be advocates. They have to be advocates for it. And if that's a business you want to get involved in, it's something to think about, something to consider. So we studied the legal path to how it became illegal. Let's talk about how it's starting to now become legal. And then we will get to the business opportunity, because the business opportunities are absolutely incredible. They are real opportunities that exist for individuals that want to get into this industry. And I want to be able to provide some legal strategies and opportunities and business tactics and some knowledge for individuals to get involved in that. So let's talk about how it began to become legal. And you start seeing states pass laws. People started voting to legalize it. And you saw a lot of the West Coast states, they tend to be more progressive. California, Washington, and Colorado, they tend to be more, the states in the West tend to be more progressive. And so they started legalizing it. But it still was illegal on the federal level. And it's very important you understand that if it's something is illegal on the federal level, but legal on the state level, federal laws trump state law. So technically, it should never have been legal. It's still illegal on the federal level, but it's legal on the state level. So there's a conflict. But the Ogden Memo was issued, and that's very, very important. It was issued. It was named after Deputy Attorney General David Ogden. He served under under Eric Holder, the Attorney General under Barack Obama, and they passed the Ogden Memo, which said that federal prosecutors won't prosecute for medical marijuana in states that have passed medical marijuana that made it legal in their states. So that was big. That was very big, because now we have the legal clarity from a federal level that, okay, we know how to operate. Okay, we won't get prosecuted for medical marijuana. And then they had the Cole Memo, but the Cole Memo was rescinded by Jeff Sessions when he became in office. But then they also have I hope I pronounced this right, it's called the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment. And that's pretty much more the same what I was saying. It pretty much just allows a clarity, and that the Justice Department spend money to prosecute states that have implemented medical marijuana cannabis businesses. So it's more the same. But and then it took it another step further in 2014 under the Obama administration. It said that under the Obama administration, with the FinCEN regulatory body, it said that banks and credit unions can provide financial services to cannabis-related businesses. That is very important. That was the big one right there, because historically, if you were operating in cannabis or whatever it may be, you couldn't get a bank account, because, as I mentioned, it was illegal on a federal level. And most banks, most of the large banks at least, they typically have offices in multiple states, so they weren't touching it. Most of the big banks are still not touching it, because it's still illegal on the federal level, and they'd rather not have to deal with all the state-to-state issues. They'd rather just not deal with that. And there's still a lot of vague areas with that. But a lot of credit unions in different states are offering bank accounts to individuals because the cannabis industry is very cash intensive. A lot of dispensaries have to deal with cash because people weren't processing the transactions. But it's starting to change now. And we're going to talk about some business opportunities with that. So with that, it doesn't necessarily be cash intensive because if it's cash intensive, you tend to attract criminals because if there's a lot of cash, people know it's typically easy to get to it. And they typically get robbed and many things such as that. So that was a big one, allowing banks to work with businesses in that area. Also, the Farm Bill 2018, it legalized hemp because with the cannabis plant, there's marijuana, which has a psychedelic effect, so it give you the high feeling. But you also have the hemp aspect of the cannabis plant, and that can be used for. I mean, there's over a thousand products can be made out of hemp, and so that legalized that as well. And then now, currently in Congress, you have the MORE Act. At least at the time of this writing, at the time of this video, you have the MORE Act, where they're trying to take it a step further. They're trying to take cannabis off the Controlled Substance Act list. So earlier I talked about how cannabis is considered right now on the same level as LSD, heroin. They're trying to remove it from that level, as well as they're trying to like do some social justice reforms and allow individuals who may have been arrested for cannabis to get their record clean. So those are some good things. I hope it'll get passed, and if it does, we'll talk more about that as well. But we have to ask the question because it's legal now. People making billions of dollars off of cannabis. When there's individuals who were arrested, spent a lot of time in the state penitentiary, in the federal penitentiary, off of something that's legal now. People are making money off that. And we understand the racial aspects of it. If we don't, we need to understand it because that has a real component, and that's the elephant in the room, and that we want to talk about because studies have shown that blacks and whites use marijuana at the same levels. But blacks are 4 times as likely to be arrested for cannabis, for marijuana, than whites are, despite the fact that blacks and whites use it at the same level, at the same volume. So there's a significant racial component to it. And we have to talk about that. And now you're seeing companies, the same people that they would have been arrested for are now, in some ways, not been able to be included into this opportunity. It's a big enough opportunity. But I'm going to talk about some ways individuals can get involved in cannabis, regardless of your record. And I think that has to be it because there are people still in jail off of this stuff. Now, hopefully there's more people starting to get out, but that has to be talked about. But even if you did spend a lot of time in jail based on your cannabis conviction, you also had that on your record, and there's been a stigma attached to you probably for decades or however long it's been as being a bad person, as being a criminal, as being a felon. It's probably prevented these individuals from maybe get jobs off of something, as I said, is people are now making billions of dollars off of. So the question is levels of unfairness, and part of the legal system is supposed to be based on fairness. And one of the legal system also is supposed to be based on, one of the purposes of the legal system of laws is punish, supposed to be a deterrence. It's supposed to be about justice. And so when you see that no matter what the punishment is, it's not going to deter people from using cannabis. As I mentioned earlier, you have to step back and say, okay, should this have ever been legal? Should this have ever been illegal in the first place? I'm not the jury, but that's something that individuals, I'm not the congressman, I'm not the senator, but it's something that we should be asking in the first place. Like, people have literally spent decades missing opportunities. And when a person goes to prison, it doesn't affect that person, it affects everyone. The children, the wives, the girlfriends, the mothers, the father, it affects everyone, it affects that entire community. Off of something that people are making billions of dollars off of it. But I wanted to talk about that, but now let's get to the business aspect of it because we have to get to this money. That's what it's about. I mean, I can talk a lot about race relations and social justice. I'm writing a book. It'll be the only legal guide book you need. I'm talking about many of these things. Like, I'm talking about a lot about police encounters. I haven't really talked much about criminal law, but I'm gonna talk about a lot of issues, a lot of legal areas. I'm gonna talk about criminal law in the book. But I've been focusing mainly on the video on economics, on business, because we have to get to this money. There's a lot of money being made in the cannabis, and I want individuals to be a part of this. But let's talk about it, because it is an incredible opportunity. And I'm going to focus 2 areas when it comes to cannabis, the business aspect. I'm going to focus on the part that deals with the cannabis plant and the area of business that does not deal with the cannabis plant. We need to understand. You can still be in the cannabis industry and not deal with the cannabis plant. Both are $1 million, $1 billion industries. sub industries within the industry of cannabis. The cannabis is like it touches everything. I mean, finance, law. Economics, therapy. I mean, so let's talk about the aspect when it comes to the cannabis flower. I mean, when it comes to that, that's probably the most regulated aspect of the cannabis industry. I mean, when you're dealing with that flower, that plant, I mean, that has been decades of just regulation when it comes to law, and as it becomes legal, they're really going to be hammering down on it. They're going to try to tax it. They're going to try to make sure it's clean, the environmental conditions with it, and it is the main thing. You have to be updated on the various licenses that you need in that particular state. It's difficult for me to say give a blanket licenses you need because every state is different and they're going to regulate it different. But typically, what you're probably going to need, you're going to need a business license, and you're definitely probably going to need the cannabis license. And with that, I mean, if you've been watching my videos, I mean, I would hope you would know how to start a business now. I mean, I've been doing these videos. This is episode 82, I believe, a daily vlog. So let's just go through it. If you don't know how to start a business, typically, in essence, you go to the state you're in. You go to the Secretary of State's office. Only be online and create your LLC. Now, in this area, it may not be an LLC if you're seeking for investments, but let's just say it's an LLC. It's an LLC. If you're in California Secretary of State's office, Oregon, Washington, Colorado, Secretary of State's office, and create your LLC. You need an EIN number. That's your tax ID number. And with that, typically you can typically go to a bank and open a bank account. Now it may be different. Now these things may not necessarily be as on point with the cannabis industry, because the cannabis industry is so regulated. Especially when it comes to that flower. When it comes to that cannabis plant, that plant is so regulated. But we're gonna talk about that. But you can start a business. Those general business standpoints you need. Maybe an operating agreement. Even if you're by yourself, you still need an operating agreement because it'll put down on paper how the business is being operated. So you need an operating agreement. But you also need a cannabis license. And the cannabis license can be typically two types of cannabis license. They can be, depending on the state you're in. It can be a competitive license, or it can be an open license. Now in the states on the west coast of the U.S., they typically have open licenses, where it's typically easier to get them. But the states on the east, they typically have competitive licenses, where they're only giving out so many cannabis licenses. And not everyone may not be able to get a cannabis license because they only have a certain amount they're giving out. And those can be what they call competitive. And those can be difficult to get. And they typically have a ranking, certain factors that you must meet in order to qualify for this. And certain more factors you meet, the more chances you are likely to get this cannabis license. And some states, it's very important. Some states are rewarding companies, giving them more points, increasing their chance of getting a cannabis license if they're including people who may have been convicted of possession of marijuana or selling marijuana, whatever it may be. If you have one of those people on your team that you're partnering with, it increases your chances of getting one of those licenses in the competitive state. So it'll be interesting to see what New York does. I think it may be. I could be wrong, but if it's based on the trajectory of states on the East Coast, it may be a competitive license. So individuals who have that conviction, this is your opportunity. Cannabis means it's very difficult. It's very difficult and it's very regulated. But the idea is that you can set up your business, but you can't just walk up to a company and say, "Hey, I've been registered for cannabis. Let's partner together." You have to say, "I have a business that's operating in cannabis. Let's do a joint venture. Let's partner together, business to business, to increase our chances of getting this cannabis." So that's how you go about doing it. You bring that opportunity, and you can get involved in cannabis in these states that have competitive licenses. So that's how you do it. And there's a lot of money to be made. I mean, but it's not necessarily just focusing on the plant. Let's focus on things that don't necessarily touch the cannabis plant. But there's a lot of things that do not touch the cannabis plant that can be considered part of the cannabis industry. One, it could be marketing, digital marketing. I mean, if you have a business, you have to market your business. People have to know about you. If they don't know about you, they typically can't come to you. Which is you have to understand aspects of digital marketing, SEO, website designs, apps. We're gonna talk a little bit more about digital marketing later on in this video, but these are some things. That's one industry. Magazines, podcasts, vlogs. These are things that there are many magazine cannabis related magazines and blogs and podcasts. I mean, you know how to make. Many things you can do. I mean, also software and technology. I mean, how to help the industry run more efficiently. I mean, you can maybe create sensors and irrigation systems and things such as that for the cannabis plant. Business operations, talk technology for the business operation, how to running things. I mean, you can create software technology for this industry. HR and payroll, that's another aspect of the cannabis industry. Security, as I mentioned, cannabis is still, generally speaking, it's very cash intensive. And they need security. So if you are a person who has some security experience, or you serve in the military, you can provide security to the cannabis industry. These are very real things. You can actually do this. You can create your company security. And if you're, the reality that you can't teach size. If you're 6'4", 300 pounds, or whatever it may be, you can't teach size. It is what it is. You can't teach that. So you're more likely to be qualified to be a security person based on your size. And if you combine that with some courage and the virtues of fearlessness and courage, you can definitely be successful in this. Also, the culinary aspects of cannabis. The recipes related to cannabis. The cookbooks and things such as that. How to make the canna butter, how to make many things such as that when it comes to cannabis. Paraphernalia. You see a lot of that. You see the pipes, the bongs, all the different things such as that. None of this stuff touches the cannabis. Maybe the culinary aspect does, but you can write books and recipes online and things such as that. Never really touch the cannabis plant. Event planning, focus on cannabis. Event planning is very big. And conferences about cannabis, events about cannabis, many things such as that. You can be involved in this. Bringing speakers together, bringing celebrities that are involved in that. You can bring them there. You can start doing tours. I know you see a lot of wine tours. Like people go to different wines and tour the wine vineyards. That can be done in the same thing in cannabis. You can be a person that can do the marketing, bring the people and take people on cannabis tours. You can do that. Fertilizer, growing equipment. I mentioned irrigation systems. I mentioned many of the things like greenhouses. There's a famous example of how, like during the gold rush in San Francisco, how the people that sold the shovels and people that sold the equipment made more money than the people that actually did searching for gold. So people that searching for gold didn't find the gold. The money that was made in the industry were people that were selling people the shovels, and people that were selling people the motels and things such as that, and the people that ran the bars and things such as that. The people that actually digging for gold, they actually didn't make too much money digging for gold. So, but that same analogy can be applied to the cannabis industry. You can focus on all the things that they call the ancillary things that surround the cannabis plant, and you can make a lot of money off that. Also, hemp products. There are over 100 products, at least 100 products that you can think of for hemp. You have different, soaps. You got different. I've seen where they say a car can be made out of hemp. You make fabric out of hemp. Many things such as that. Also, lawyers, accountants, consultants. Things such as that. These are things that people can do to focus on the cannabis industry. They can specialize in the cannabis industry. I mentioned motels earlier. What they call bud and breakfasts. The cannabis motels, the cannabis hotels. I know Mike Tyson is getting ready to do a Tyson Ranch. It's going to be a 420 friendly place. And none of this stuff is touching the actual plant of it. You have to make sure you're following the licenses and make sure you're being compliant. We're going to talk about that, but also merchandise, hats, t-shirts. If you make a nice logo design, if people like a nice catchy phrase or whatever on the t-shirt, people will buy it. And that's very important. It's the same thing. You want to have a business plan, and you want to create your business and things such as that. Now, I'm typically a little leery of business plans, because the idea is that the majority of businesses fail in their first year. That's just across really any industry. According to SBA, 90% of all businesses fail, but you would never read a business plan that talks about that business is failing. So you have to take business plans with a grain of salt. Maybe write your business proposal. But things such as that. But you also want to be mindful of that you can get individuals to help you as well. Business is a team sport. You want to get you board of directors, individuals that may have been in the cannabis industry, individuals that know what it tastes like. That's one thing you can do. Individuals that have been in the industry, individuals that have more experience than you. Maybe they don't necessarily have to be in the industry. They can also have skills that transfer. You want to get you a lawyer. You want to get you an accountant. You can get individuals that in that industry that can help you in that particular area. And then you can learn how to create a successful business. Now, I talked about marketing earlier, and the thing with marketing, particularly digital marketing, I say it a lot. I think digital marketing is the most powerful form of marketing that's ever existed. But right now, digital marketing has its difficulties when it comes to the cannabis industry. Like most social media platforms don't allow cannabis ads, so you have to work around that. And one way you can work around that is what they call SEO, search engine optimization. You can focus on backlinks, having different sites link to your site, and that way you can gain in the rankings of SEO. And also you maybe have some influencer marketing. Maybe some influencers in a lower area, they can market, they can talk about your different dispensary or your tour or whatever it is, and you can gain followers that way without actually going to the paid advertising route. There are many things you can do with it, but those are some of the ways you can do it, digital marketing, without necessarily having to rely on the paid advertisement of Google and Facebook and those big powerful platforms. But we also have to talk about the tax aspect of it, because taxes are very real. And the cannabis in particular, you have to understand about the tax code 280E. That's very, very important. It's very relevant to the tax to the cannabis industry, because it allows, it prevents the normal deductions for businesses in the cannabis industry. So most people, when it comes to business, you can deduct lawyer fees. That's very important. I want y'all to realize that you can hire me and deduct my fees off your taxes. What else? Tons of deductions. Travel. A lot of deductions you can be deducted with taxes. But with the cannabis industry, most of those deductions aren't applicable to it, particularly when the ones that involve the actual cannabis flower, the actual plant. And so it's still heavily regulated. And despite all of that, millions of dollars in profit are being made every single year. Despite all of that, that's the demand for the cannabis plant, for that industry. And with that, you have to be mindful of that. You can only pretty much deduct the cost of the goods sold. That's pretty much all you can pretty much deduct. You can't deduct your rent. You can't deduct lawyer fees, as I mentioned. It has the limitations that it has. But there is a way around that to a degree. This is high level legal strategy right here. This is very high level legal strategy. This is it, because this involves not necessarily the normal legal advice. This involves bringing in the tax law aspect of it, because in essence, what you want to do is you want to have two businesses. Say, for example, you are a dispensary, or say, for example, you're dealing with the cannabis flower. Anything that deals with cannabis flower will be in this one legal entity, this one company, and everything that doesn't is in legal entity company number 2. And with the company number 2, you can then deduct all your legal fees. You can deduct lawyer fees. You can deduct the cost of your rent. That's very important. Normally, instead of having all of the deductions, instead of having all your things in one company, you have two companies. Say, for example, you're a dispensary, and with that dispensary, you are dealing with actual cannabis flower, but you also are paying rent. You may own the building. You may have T-shirts. You may have merchandise. You may have pipes. You may have bongs. You may have whatever it is. All those things would be in a second legal entity. It's very important to understand that. So what you would do is you would have the company 1 leasing space from the company 2, and the company 2, you take all the deductions, all your different deductions. You can take all that from you and be able to maximize your profit, because the only reason you go in business is to make money. If you want to do goodwill, start your nonprofit. I'm not saying be ruthless. There's a thing called social entrepreneurship, being responsible in your entrepreneurship. But the main idea is that profit motive must prevail. So that's you go in business to make money. So that's very important to understand that. Combining the different legal strategy, the high level legal strategy, because you bring the tax law aspect of it. I used to be a tax lawyer. I used to do tax law. Like, I was admitted to the U.S. tax court. So I understand a lot of these different issues that affect the industry. But what else? That's very important. And when it comes to funding, it's very difficult to get. Most of the investment is being done in the cannabis industry is done in things that don't necessarily touch the plant. Because venture capitalists, angel investors are leery of the regulations. There's so many regulations involved in it. So they really deal with something that's far away from the actual plant. So if you're doing like the technology, the IT technology, software aspect of it, if you're doing with product design, doing media, magazine, whatever it is, those may get more investment from venture capital, but those are easier to scale because there's legal clarity when it comes to that. So with the funding opportunities, it's just, if you can't necessarily get venture capital funding or funding from angel investors, you have to follow some of the traditional routes. You'll have to, in essence, you have to raise some money from your family and friends. You can do a family and friends round. You can get a loan from your family and friends or some investment money. You also can save some money before you get into the industry. You can save money first and then join the industry. It's typical that this is what typically most businesses do. You also can, if you have a house, you could potentially consider doing what I call a HELOC, a home equity line of credit, and using some of that money to fund your startup in the cannabis industry. There are many things you can do in the industry, and that's some of the ways you can help raise funding. And if you can show that you are successful, then you may be able to raise a round. Maybe first you can raise like a seed round, initial investment money. That can be your savings, some of your money for your family and friends. And then if you show that you're successful in business, because money talks, success screams, you can then begin to raise money from other venture capital firms or angel investors and things such as that. And, as I mentioned, VCs are they're more likely to fund businesses that don't necessarily touch the cannabis plant. So if you are in a state that doesn't have cannabis as legal, you still going to be involved in the cannabis industry. But it's important to make sure you're following the law and regulations so you don't necessarily get into legal trouble. You definitely don't want to get into legal trouble. But that's pretty much all I have. We talked about a lot in this video. We talked about the legal landscape, how cannabis was illegal, became illegal, how it became legal, and the recent developments with New York legalizing cannabis, as well as the business opportunities. There's a lot of business opportunities, both business opportunities that touch the flower and business opportunities that don't touch the flower. So talked about a lot in this video, and I hope you all have enjoyed it. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If you know someone interested in cannabis or things such as that, or who want to get involved in it, send this video to them. And I hope you all find some value from this video. This is episode 82. And we're one step closer to 1,000 episodes. Thanks.